What happens when a warehouse CEO trades his corner office for a pair of steel-toe boots and no one knows who he is? Brandon Bishop stood in the back of his black SUV, pulling on a neon yellow safety vest over his gray hoodie. He looked nothing like the man on the company's website, dressed in a tailored suit with polished shoes. His beard was grown out, glasses on, and a baseball cap pulled low. He checked himself in the rearview mirror one last time, then stepped out into the biting morning air. This was location 4 of 6, one of the warehouses he'd inherited after his father passed 5 years ago. The others he'd visited recently had been running well enough. Good managers, decent morale. But this one? The numbers didn't line up. Inventory losses, high turnover, and a steady trickle of customer complaints. And he'd never personally stepped foot in it. Brandon had never met anyone at this warehouse. It was in a different state, and with over 400 employees total across all sites, it wasn't strange that nobody here had ever seen the owner face to face. That's what made this plan work. He'd applied as a temp through a third-party agency under the name Brian, and after 2 weeks of back and forth, he was placed here. Inside, the warehouse buzzed with forklifts and conveyor belts. The air was cool, smelled like cardboard and oil. A manager in a red polo approached him with a clipboard. "You the new guy, Brian?" Brandon nodded.
Yeah.
"Started today." The man looked him over. "You speak Spanish?" "No," he scribbled something down.
All right.
"You'll be unpacking with Raul. Don't screw up." Brandon followed Raul, a quiet middle-aged man with tired eyes and thick hands. His English was broken, but he was patient. He showed Brandon how to scan items, pack them, and label the boxes. They worked side by side for hours with barely a word. Around midday, a younger guy named Mateo joined their line. He looked barely 20, wiry and quick with his hands. Brandon noticed him glance nervously every time the red polo manager walked by. "Why's he so jumpy?" Brandon asked Raul when they were alone. Raul didn't answer at first. Then, quietly, "He don't want to get sent home again." "Sent home?" Raul nodded, eyes on the box in front of him. "If too many hours, he say we must go. No pay." Brandon frowned.
Wait.
"He sends you home early?" Raul nodded again. "We work 5 hours, he say, go home. But papers say 8. We get paid 5. Brandon felt heat rise in his chest. "And that happens a lot?" "Every week." That night, Brandon sat in his cheap motel room, staring at a blank notepad. If Raul was telling the truth, if people were getting sent home early, but paid as if they worked full shifts, someone was pocketing the difference. And if it was happening here, how long had it been going on? The next morning, he showed up early on purpose. The warehouse was mostly empty, but the break room lights were on. Inside, the same red polo manager Brandon found out his name was Darren was talking to a woman in cleaning uniform. She stood stiff, arms crossed. "I told you already," Darren snapped, handing her an envelope. "You get what I say you worked. Don't like it, don't come back." She took the envelope slowly, lips tight. Brandon slipped past without being noticed, his stomach turning. That afternoon, he asked Mateo during a quiet moment, "You ever get paid less than what you work?" Mateo shook his head quickly.
No.
"I always get paid." But he wouldn't meet Brandon's eyes. Later, as they packed boxes together, Brandon said, "You don't have to lie to me. I'm just another guy on the floor." Mateo looked around. Then, quieter than a whisper, "We all get shorted. But if we say something..." "Darren says he'll call immigration." Brandon's jaw clenched. "What?" Mateo just nodded. By the third day, Brandon had seen enough. Raul being told to clock out early again. A woman called Luisa being told there were no hours for her today, even though the floor was clearly short-staffed. Darren barking at workers like they were disposable. But it wasn't just Darren. The district manager, a slick guy named Greg, had shown up that morning. Brandon overheard him say, "Whatever you're doing to keep the budget tight, keep it up. Corporate's eating it up." Brandon felt sick. This wasn't just one bad apple. That night, he called his assistant from outside the warehouse. "I need full payroll reports for this location. Last 6 months. Compare clock and data to what was actually paid out." Quietly. He hung up before she could ask questions. Brandon leaned against the metal wall as the sun set behind the warehouse. He rubbed his face hard.
He knew what he was about to do next.
Tomorrow, he wasn't going in as Brian. He was walking through those doors as Brandon Bishop, the owner, the man whose name was on every paycheck. And someone was going to answer for this. Brandon walked through the warehouse entrance just after dawn.
No vest. No hoodie. No capítulo.
His button-down shirt was tucked in, and his ID badge with the Bishop Warehousing logo hung clearly from a lanyard around his neck. The security guard at the front desk glanced up, did a double take, then stood quickly. "Mr. Bishop, I didn't know you were coming." "That's the point," Brandon said calmly. "Where's Darren?" "Probably in the break room, sir." "Thank you." He didn't need directions. He'd walked this floor for 3 days straight. The layout was burned into his memory now. The scent of dust and diesel, the dull hum of conveyor belts, the dull ache already forming in his lower back from lifting boxes, it was all still with him. He pushed the break room door open. Darren was sitting at a table, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. He didn't look up. Brandon stepped inside and waited. After a few seconds, Darren glanced over, then narrowed his eyes. "Can I help you?" Brandon nodded once.
Yes.
"I'm Brandon Bishop. I own this company." Darren sat up slowly. "Wait, what?" "I've been working undercover here for the past 3 days. I've seen enough. You and I are going to walk the floor together."
Now.
Darren opened his mouth, but Brandon had already turned and walked out. He followed in silence. They passed Raoul on the line. He didn't notice them at first. He was too focused on taping a box shut with careful precision. Brandon stopped. "Raoul," he said gently. Raoul turned, confused at first, then looked at Darren, then back at Brandon. "I'm Brandon, the owner. Thank you for showing me how to do the job right." Raoul froze for a moment, then gave a small nod. His eyes darted to Darren, then back to the box. Brandon continued walking. "How many people are scheduled today?" he asked Darren. Should be 15 on shift." "Then why are there only 9 people on the floor?" "There were some call-outs," Darren muttered. "And the schedule in the back room says 20. So, where are the other 11? He didn't answer. Brandon stopped near the loading dock. 2 women were dragging pallets by hand because the electric jack was clearly out of charge. One of them, hair pulled into a tight bun, looked up, startled. "Do you usually work this short-handed?" Brandon asked. She hesitated. "Lately, yeah. We're told not to ask for help if we're behind, just to move faster." Brandon looked at Darren. "You're done." Darren blinked. "Excuse me? You're fired. Immediately. Hand your badge to security and leave the building. If you refuse, I'll have you escorted." But Brandon didn't look at him again. Instead, he stepped toward the woman. "What's your name?" "Clarissa," she said, still watching Darren as he stormed off. "Clarissa, I'm going to shut this floor down for the rest of the morning. You and the others are going to get a paid break. I need to speak with everyone." Her face softened slightly, though she still looked unsure. Within 20 minutes, the entire shift was gathered near the main packing area, where Brandon stood on a small stepladder so he could be seen over the rows of shelving. He held a folded printout in one hand and a yellow legal pad in the other. "I know a lot of you don't know who I am," he began. "My name is Brandon Bishop. My father built this company with his hands. I took it over 5 years ago, and lately, I've been seeing problems the reports weren't explaining." He looked around. No one moved. Most of the employees stood with arms crossed or hands in pockets. A few looked directly at him. Others stared at the floor. So I came in as one of you. I worked the line. I packed boxes. I listened. And what I saw was unacceptable. Someone in the back shifted. A forklift beeped softly in the distance. People told me they were being clocked out early, but only paid for part of their shifts. That's illegal. Flat-out wage theft. Some of you said you were threatened if you spoke up, threatened with being reported to immigration, threatened with losing your hours. A few heads turned toward each other. Whispers passed through the group. I want you to hear it from me directly. That ends now. Anyone who is shorted will be made whole. We're doing a full audit of the last 6 months. You'll be paid every penny you're owed. A man near the front, maybe in his late 30s, raised a hand. What about people who already quit because of it? We'll be contacting every former employee on file. If they were underpaid, they'll be included too. The man nodded, lowering his hand. Brandon turned to the legal pad. I also want volunteers to speak with me directly. If you have something to say, good, bad, anything, I will listen. And you will not be punished for telling the truth. I'm not here to scare anyone. I'm here to fix what's broken. Another voice called out, this time from a woman in a gray sweatshirt. Are the supervisors going to change too? Darren wasn't the only one. Brandon nodded.
Yes.
If there are others abusing their power, I will hear it. And they'll be held accountable. He stepped down from the ladder. Take an hour. Go to the break room. Food will be brought in. You're still on the clock. As the crowd dispersed, Brandon walked toward the office. Inside, he found Greg, the district manager, standing by the window with his arms crossed. You can't just fire people without going through HR protocol, Greg said sharply. Brandon kept his voice even. You knew what Darren was doing. I didn't know anything illegal. You told him to keep the budget tight. You praised him for it. Did you ever once ask how he was doing it? Greg hesitated. Look, margins are thin. We're trying to stay competitive, Brandon cut him off. By stealing wages? By threatening people who don't have power? That's not staying competitive. That's cowardice. Greg stepped forward. You're blowing this out of proportion. No one made you come here. If you wanted to micromanage, you could have just, you're fired too. Greg's eyes widened. You're serious? Brandon turned to the door. Security will walk you out. After Greg was gone, Brandon stood alone in the office, looking out at the warehouse floor. Clarissa was sitting at a table with Raul and another woman he hadn't met yet. They were eating sandwiches brought in by a catering team his assistant had called that morning. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He spent the rest of the day holding one-on-one meetings. Clarissa told him about being forced to skip lunch most days. Mateo finally admitted that his last paycheck had been nearly $80 short. Another man explained how the forklifts were rarely maintained, 2 had dead batteries for weeks, and no one ever fixed them. By the end of the day, Brandon had filled 3 legal pads with notes. Names. Incidents. Systemic failures. It wasn't just one rogue manager, it was a culture of neglect, and it had gone on far too long. Before leaving, he gathered the remaining employees in the same area as before. I'll be bringing in a new site manager by the end of the week, he announced. She's coming from one of our top-performing locations. Until then, I'll be here every day. Working alongside you. Listening. Learning. He paused. You've carried this place on your backs without being treated right. That changes now. As people left in small groups, a few stopped to thank him quietly. Raul gave him a small, firm handshake. Mateo didn't say anything, he just nodded once, eyes steady. Brandon locked up that night with a heavy heart but a clear purpose. He'd seen the truth. Now it was time to rebuild brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck, person by person. Brandon arrived just after 6. The warehouse was still locked, quiet except for the distant groan of an industrial HVAC unit cycling on. He stood by the loading dock entrance with a clipboard in one hand, a metal thermos in the other, and waited until the first shift workers started trickling in, some yawning, others silent behind tired eyes. The temporary site lead, a woman named Tanya Nguyen, pulled up in a gray sedan and stepped out with a folder pressed to her chest. She'd flown in the night before from the Albuquerque facility, one of their most efficient sites, with a strong safety record and unusually low turnover. Brandon had called her personally. "You sure you want me walking in as interim lead?" she asked under her breath as they entered the facility together. "Might be some resistance." "You're not here to make friends," Brandon said. "You're here to make it run right." He paused. "But let them talk. Listen first. Don't assume." Tanya nodded once. "Understood." Inside, the morning shift was already moving. Clarissa and Raul were at their stations. Mateo was getting gloves from the supply rack, and a few new faces were being trained by a lead hand named Darnell, one of the only supervisors Brandon hadn't had a reason to doubt yet. Tanya walked the line quietly, making mental notes, asking brief, practical questions. "How long are your daily rotations? When was the last time this order was calibrated? Who decides the picking order?" Clarissa kept her replies short but honest. "Depends on who's working. Sometimes we just guess." When Tanya asked why the second packing station was empty, Clarissa gestured toward the back. "No one to fill it. We've been running understaffed since before I got here." Brandon stayed to the side, letting Tanya lead. He noticed Mateo watching her from behind a stack of folded cartons. His expression was wary, careful. By mid-morning, Tanya requested a meeting with the existing shift leads. Only 2 showed up. Brandon took a seat in the back of the office, arms crossed, while Tanya stood near the whiteboard. One of the leads, a tall man with a shaved head named Vince, slouched slightly in his chair. The other, a younger woman named Jessa, sat upright, glancing occasionally in Brandon's direction. "Let's talk floor coverage," Tanya began, clicking a marker open. "Why is the outbound station only staffed 3 days a week?" Vince shrugged. "Because we don't have the people. You think we're hiding workers in the walls." Jessa leaned forward. "We've been asking for more temps. But every time we do, Greg said it wasn't in the budget." Brandon didn't move, but he took note. Tanya's tone didn't shift. "Who approves the schedules?" "Technically Greg did," Vince said nonchalant. "Now, I guess you do." "And who logs changes to time cards?" Jessa looked down.
Vince answered.
That went through Darren. "Did you ever question why people were being clocked out early?" "I don't get paid to ask questions," Vince said. Brandon stood. "Then you're not getting paid anymore."
Vince blinked.
"Excuse me? I don't tolerate indifference. There were employees being shorted hundreds of dollars in wages. You didn't ask questions? That's your answer." Vince glanced at Tanya, then back at Brandon. "You can't just fire. I can, and I just did. Turn in your badge."
Vince stood slowly, scoffing.
"Whole place is falling apart, and you're making scapegoats." "No," Brandon said. "I'm removing people who watched others suffer and did nothing." Once Vince left, the room fell quiet. Jessa looked tense but didn't speak. Brandon turned to her. "Do you want to stay?" She nodded slowly.
"Ido."
"Then earn it. Start over. Full transparency." After she left, Tanya let out a quiet breath. He wasn't even trying to hide it. "They never do when they think no one's watching," Brandon said. That afternoon, Brandon met with Angela McCarthy, a compliance auditor he'd flown in from headquarters. She set up in the break room with a laptop and a stack of folders. Employees were invited to sit with her one by one. No appointments needed. Raul came in first. He brought a folded piece of paper with scribbles, dates, and shift times from the last 2 months. Angela reviewed it and nodded. "We'll confirm this against the system logs. If what you've written matches what we find, you'll be issued a correction and back pay." Raul hesitated. "Will it change anything?" Angela looked up. "It already is." By late afternoon, the break room had a steady rotation of people stopping in. Most were quiet. A few were hesitant. But word spread fast. Someone was finally listening. Brandon spent the rest of the shift walking the floor with Tanya. They watched Clarissa move from station to station, filling in where no one else was. She didn't ask for help. She just did the work. She's been carrying more than her share, Tanya noted. Brandon nodded. She's done it without asking for anything. They stopped near the inbound dock, where a pallet jack was parked awkwardly across the lane. One of the newer workers, a guy named Eric, was struggling to maneuver a fresh load of boxes. Tanya stepped in. "That jack's not balanced," she said. "You'll blow your shoulder if you keep forcing it like that." Eric looked up, surprised. No one else said anything. "I just figured it was old." Brandon crouched to inspect the wheels. "This hasn't been greased in weeks." Tanya flagged it for removal. "We'll get maintenance on it. You shouldn't be pushing anything that wonky." Eric's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thanks. I thought I was just doing it wrong." "You're not," Brandon said. When the shift ended at 4, Brandon gathered the crew again, this time in the break room, chairs pulled together in a loose semicircle. "I know it's been a chaotic few days," he began, "but I want to be clear about where we're going next." He looked around the room. Some faces he recognized. Some were new. "We're rebuilding this location safely, legally, and with respect for every person who works here. That means we bring in the staff we need. That means no more unpaid hours, no more threats, and no more silence from leadership." Clarissa raised a hand slowly. "Can we suggest changes?" "I mean real changes." "Yes," Brandon said. "That's why Tanya's here. We're not just fixing payroll. We're redesigning the entire workflow." Mateo spoke next, eyes still cautious. "What about people who are scared to speak up? Some of us still aren't sure." Brandon didn't rush his reply. "You don't have to speak up today. But when you do, we'll be here. No one's going to be punished for telling the truth." He turned to Tanya. "Starting tomorrow, we're launching an anonymous reporting system. Internal, third-party monitored." Tanya added, "And we'll be offering paid training for anyone who wants to upskill forklift certs, inventory systems, even English language support." Clarissa glanced around the room. "That would actually help a lot of people." "We're not just patching holes," Brandon said. "We're rebuilding the foundation." As people stood to leave, the energy felt different. Not cheerful. This wasn't a celebration, but steadier. Grounded. Outside, the sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the lot. Brandon stood by the dock doors with Tanya as workers filtered out, some waving, others just nodding. "You think they believe it yet?"
Tanya asked.
"Maybe not yet," Brandon said. "But they're watching. If we show up day after day and keep our word, they'll believe it soon enough." Tanya looked toward the gate, where Raul and Mateo were walking out together, talking for the first time all day. "Then we'd better keep showing up," she said. Brandon nodded. And he would. By the end of the second week, Brandon had memorized the layout of the warehouse floor down to the last pallet rack. Tanya had stabilized the schedule, but the staffing shortage hadn't vanished overnight. The team was still running lean, and no one was under any illusion that a few meetings and a catered lunch had fixed the culture. The audit had concluded. Angela sent Brandon the full report that morning. 17 employees had been shorted wages over the last 6 months. The numbers weren't small. The worst case was Luisa, a single mother working part-time hours who had been underpaid by over $1,200. Others ranged from a few hundred to nearly 1,000. Brandon had already approved the back pay and ordered that each payment be issued with a letter of explanation and apology on company letterhead, signed by him. He didn't want a settlement.
He wanted to make it right.
That morning, he called a meeting in the same break room where he'd first addressed the crew. He'd asked Tanya to cover the floor so every affected employee could be present without disruption. The ones who hadn't been directly impacted were still working, but Brandon had made it clear nobody would be penalized for taking the time to witness what came next. He stood at the front, holding a folder with the letters inside. Beside him, Louisa sat quietly, her hands resting on her lap. She hadn't spoken much since the audit began, but she'd agreed to be there when he asked privately. Not for show, but because he owed her the courtesy of addressing her face to face. "You were failed by people who were supposed to protect you," he said, addressing the room. "That's on me. Because I trusted a system that didn't deserve it." Someone near the back, a forklift operator named Tori, crossed her arms. "What happens after we get the checks? Is it just back to business?" "No," Brandon said. "It's not. We're doing more than paying what's owed. We're rewriting how this facility operates from the ground up. Tanya's creating new protocols for how time is logged, how complaints are tracked, and how schedules are approved. Everything will go through verification." A worker named Miguel leaned forward. "What if it happens again?" "It won't," Tanya said. "We've added an audit checkpoint every quarter. Random samples system-wide. If there's even a hint of manipulation, it gets flagged." Another hand went up Jessa. She looked more confident than she had the week prior. "Are you going to tell the other warehouses about this?" "They've already been informed," Brandon said. "Every location is getting the same audit. Some are already underway." He handed Louisa the first envelope. She took it gently, opened it, and read the letter in silence. Then she folded it again, stood, and looked at Brandon. "You could have just sent this in the mail," she said. "I know. But you came here. You worked with us. You saw it yourself." He met her eyes. "That's the least I could do." Louisa gave a single nod, then stepped aside so others could receive theirs. No applause. No ceremony. Just quiet, deliberate restitution. Once the meeting ended, Tanya approached him near the hallway by the supervisor's office.
"Two things," she said.
1. The outbound team said the automated labeler's been jamming again. "I already submitted the ticket, but they're improvising until maintenance gets here." "Understood," Brandon said. "What's the second?" "There's an issue with Vince's old group. One of the floaters, Michael, has been resisting new assignments. He's refused 2 reassignments in the last 3 days." "Why?" "Claims he's not taking orders from anyone who wasn't here before. Yesterday, he walked away from Clarissa mid-task." Brandon didn't hesitate. "Let's talk to him." They found Michael by the backloading dock, leaning against a stack of shrink-wrapped boxes. He didn't stand when they approached. "You've been reassigned to outbound support," Tanya said calmly. "I already told you," Michael replied, not looking at her. "That's not my job." Brandon stepped forward. "Your job is what your supervisor assigns. Tanya's the supervisor. That's your assignment." Michael straightened, jaw tight. "I've been here longer than she has." "That doesn't give you the right to ignore direction or disrespect your team," Brandon said. "You walked off shift. Twice. She's not qualified to run this crew." Brandon's voice didn't rise. "You're no longer employed here. Hand over your badge." Michael looked between them, then laughed quietly. "Figures. First chance to clean house, and you toss the ones who speak up." "You weren't speaking up," Tanya said. "You were undermining your coworkers." Michael left without another word. Brandon turned to Tanya. "Document everything. We'll include it in the internal report." That afternoon, Clarissa stopped by the office.
"She didn't sit."
"I heard about Michael." Brandon nodded. "You shouldn't have to work with someone who disrespects you." "I appreciate that," she said. "But there's still some pushback. Not from everyone, but enough that it slows us down."
He leaned against the desk.
"What do you need?" "A lead who's been through it. Someone who understands what it's like to cover gaps, train temps, and finish shifts with half a crew." "Who would you recommend?" She hesitated. "Raul." Brandon blinked. "He barely talks." "That's because no one listens. But he's the one people go to when they're confused. He's the first to help. Doesn't ask for credit." Brandon picked up his phone and dialed Tanya. Can you come to the office? 10 minutes later, Raoul stood in the doorway, wiping his hands on his shirt. Tanya gestured for him to come in. Brandon folded his arms. Clarissa thinks you'd be a good shift lead. Raoul looked down. I don't know computer things. We'll train you, Tanya said. You won't be buried in reports. You'll teach.
Guide.
Help us build this place right. Raoul looked at Brandon. You trust me? Yes, Brandon said. You've earned it. Raoul nodded once. Okay. By the end of the week, Raoul had shadowed Tanya for 2 full shifts. He kept his notes in a small spiral-bound notebook he carried in his back pocket. He didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened. Because they knew he'd been there with them on the line. In the dust, through the worst of it. Brandon's final day at the site came quietly.
No speeches. No cameras.
He walked the floor one last time, stopping to shake hands, give updates, and listen. Mateo was training a new hire on the packing line. Clarissa was reviewing rotation schedules with Jessa. And Raoul was checking load weights at the outbound station, clipboard in hand, his expression calm and focused. As Brandon stepped outside toward his rental car, Tanya caught up with him. You're heading out?
For now, he said.
You gonna disappear again?
No, he said.
And if I do, you'll call me out. She smiled. You planning to do this at every location? He opened the door. I have to, because this can't happen twice. She reached for the folder he'd left on the passenger seat. You forgot this. He shook his head. It's for you. Hiring authority. Budget control. You run this your way now. Tanya looked down at the folder, then back at him. You sure? I'm sure. He got in, started the engine, and pulled away from the warehouse. The building receded in the mirror, brick and steel fading into distance. He wasn't proud of what he'd found there, but he was proud of what they were building in its place.